We're finally live. Oh man, what a drama I had with computers and all the rest of it today. Yeah, so another late one. We're on at a bit after 4:20 on Sunday. Yeah, hope you're all having a fantastic Sunday so far and have had a fantastic weekend. We have some Earl Grey tea. We'll get into that. Yeah, I had technical difficulties with updating the computer and it not wanting to update. And then after it was updated, none of the streaming stuff would work. So yeah, we're logged into Instagram now. But the cool thing is that I can respond in the comment section there now. So that's pretty rad. Dank Den there liking that I've changed up the time schedule because that suits him in WA. And yeah, nice to see Dank Den, Dr. Rizo, Benicchio, Coco Garden, Causa. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have a few others soon. Yeah, it's not always easy. Free your mind and your ass will follow. Free your garden and your grass will follow. So yeah, let's talk about some later flowering stuff. Go into a bit of that thing before, yeah, I do a bit of a format changing and get into some other topics a bit later. But yeah, I'll kind of ease into it just in case some people are still joining. Ooh, it's very hot. Right. So we're at that point where the really fast stretch phase is over. They've moved into the swell / sort of, ripening phase. So this is all about kind of some of my thoughts on mid-flowering through to late flowering, how I treat that phase differently. And yeah, some tips on feeding, watering, all that sort of stuff that hopefully will be of some use to some people. So one key thing that I kind of haven't really got into on the last couple is ensuring that you have airflow around your pots. A lot of people neglect to have a floor fan or something to kind of stir up the air around the containers, or if you're using a bed kind of around the soil level. So yeah, that can make it a lot easier for things like gnats to establish. But it can kind of cause this really humid layer to accumulate, especially if you have, say, a scrog and then you have a lot of soil. There kind of ends up this stratified layer of really, really humid air there that obviously once you move into the ripening phase is not ideal. G'day, Twin Flame. So yeah, making sure that you've got some kind of airflow going that's going to push that up and through the canopy or stir it in some way, shape or form is kind of important. That airflow is going to help make it so that there's not kind of a swampy situation happening down there. So you do have some kind of evaporation going on to help your watering frequency, which becomes really important as the roots start to kind of stagnate and then even atrophy a little bit. But yeah, as I sort of mentioned, for pest prevention, just things like that, it's crucial. Air movement is a really cheap and easy way to make life hard for gnats if they annoy you. So that's one thing. On that though, when you're going to top dress, especially in this phase, turn your fans off. It might seem really simple, but yeah, turn your fans off, because you're going to stir up a bunch of like powder and all the rest of it. And you don't want that getting blown all over sticky flowers. So while, amendments and all the rest of it aren't exactly deadly to eat, it's not the kind of stuff that I exactly want plastered all over my flowers either when it comes time to consume them. So yeah, turn off your air circulation, do your top dressings, and then turn all that stuff back on again once it's all watered in. That's another little tip that you can employ. And yeah, that can apply after you've used stuff like your dark matter as well. Say if you've dusted some inoculant on or something to that effect. I actually made some notes this week. In that phase, I like to consider pre-activating the top dressings as well. I have been doing that in most phases lately, but it is the one where if I'm going to do it, that's the time I will do it. Mainly because it sort of facilitates, you know, okay. So what you're looking for when I'm aiming to do that feed is when it really shifts hard into that building phase. So that's when I'm timing to apply it. So just applying the top dressings without pre-activating them, there's a delay there. So it's not that I'm going to miss the window entirely, but I might not catch it in its most productive point. Sort of guesstimating to a certain extent, and then having them pre-activated on hand, so timing it so that the days are going to fall either side of it by 2 or 3 days, means that when it hits the soil and goes into the garden, that they get almost immediate access to it. So that seems to help maximize that feeding window. So yeah, that is something that I've been doing. I think it's well worth the extra effort in that particular phase of growth because it does seem to have a really good effect. some good comments from Dank Den there. Yeah, so that'll sort of stop any of that delay because, I mean, obviously, if you're aiming for around week 4 of flower, you're busy, you don't really identify when you want to apply that. By the time you get it in, it's a week or so before it really starts getting in there, and then a little bit more before it really fully breaks down. You're into 4 or 5, so it's useful, but it would have been nicer if it had that bank a little bit earlier. So maybe consider that one. As for stuff that I like to use, sorry, I'm going to keep sipping the tea. As for amendments that I like to use, it's pretty much the similar package. Like I really like the premixes. So I don't really like, it took us so long to develop the Stone Age and Herb Superbs that I don't really feel the need to go back to toying with individual stuff. Although certainly I can recognize the utility in that, in stripping the formulas back. And also, the pure fun of experimentation. For myself personally, though, I know these things work, the premixes, and so that's what I tend to use. I'll mostly in this particular phase, so the building phase, that's when I'll use the Mega Yield. There's a couple of caveats to that. Sometimes if it's a really long flowered sativa or some sort of cultivar hybrid that goes more than 12 weeks, I may choose to use balance then with the idea of using Mega Yield a little bit later. But for most people, Mega Yield is a perfect thing to use in that phase. It's got a whole range of different ingredients there that are going to really bolster that flowering phase, both in the quantity and quality ends of it. So I find that's a useful top up. Don't tend to use a whole lot if it's the first round of soil, like if it's fresh soil, first round it's been used. 40 litres of soil per plant. There's not really much of a need to feed a heap, but nonetheless, active breakdown is a great way to just stimulate the soil in general. So even half a cup around the pot goes perfectly fine. So yeah, sorry, there a question there on the pre-activation. Yeah, so that's actually a trick that we showed Otto. So yeah, he's done some really good videos on how to do it and how to do it properly. But yeah, basically you can mix it with castings, compost, or soil. A microbe source is what you're after, something that's got some carbon, got a bunch of microbes in there, and of a quality enough source, you're not going to be introducing pathogens. So yeah, Cocoa Garden there at about 3.5 weeks in, that's a perfect time to look at it. And you'll probably find, because I don't like to leave the pre-activation technique longer than 14 days, because by that point it's really more fully like getting towards the fully broken down, moving out of that kind of window. I like to try and time it within 7 to 10 days. But that should put you with that cultivar you're doing right in the optimal window for that phase. If you were going, the other one of our premixes that I'll use is also the Stone Age, because, I like to, as I've said a few times before, calcium, trace minerals, all those sort of things facilitate the use of your other fertilizers. And so while there is, calcium and all that sort of stuff in the Herb Superb, a little bit of extra stuff from the Stone Age seems to go a long way to promoting, flavor, quality, just really good quality resin glands at the end, which, that's kind of what it's all about. You want more stuff that melts. So that's what I've found that one tends to do. If you were looking at individual stuff, so you've got a really large garden, you just really need to strip things back and go utilitarian about it. Plant-based stuff, your malted barley always, because you get food, but you also get your enzymes. Hemp seed meal, coconut meal, a little bit of potassium available in that. It's a pretty good soil food. Kelp, sea-based, but kelp I really like as well, mostly at all phases. I do use neem cake. Neem's a little bit controversial these days in terms of the extracts have maybe been a bit overused. Maybe, there's some science to support certain things, but there's no evidence in the slightest that using neem cake on your soil or neem seed meal has any sort of issues. So yeah, it looks like it's done super zoom again on my phone too, which is cool. I'll reconnect. So those are some sort of plant-based ones. Neem's, good for stimulating soil life. There's a whole bunch of different compounds in it that are really good. Tends to help a little bit with your kind of pest prevention stuff around that phase, which is also good. Bit of a biocide sort of an action. So yeah, it's one of those ones where you get NPK, but you get a whole bunch of other stuff with it, which is why it's such a cool amendment. And then, your creature-based stuff like, fish bone meal, it's a good choice around that time. If you don't want to use all seed-based stuff, then bovine bone meal is really great as well. I really like the stuff that only comes from that particular source. So I don't like porcine sources of it. Some people don't like bone meal at all, but cattle farming is one thing. Taking stuff out of the ocean is the other thing. It's kind of, in some ways, I think spreading the load across, the two is maybe better than trying to take it all out of the one. But your opinion may differ. Obviously your high P guano, because you're going to get, your phosphorus, especially if it's seabird, that's what we use. You're going to get your phosphorus, you're going to get your silica, and then you're going to get calcium along with that, which is useful. And, other calcium sources that I like to use are oyster lime, just a little bit. Don't need to use a whole heap. Maybe some calcium sulfate if I've got something that's just an absolute calcium hog and it looks like it really wants it. And wollastonite is another one that I sort of like to, use for topping up the silica content. So just finding that, again, tends to promote quality, tends to promote resilience against pests. So all of that sort of stuff that one's useful for, and they shouldn't change or alter your pH too much. If you've got a variety that also likes a bit more potassium and a little bit more magnesium, then consider some langbonite added to that. And that'll sort of, those are some things that you can kind of utilize or pepper on to sort of individually boost your soil rather than going with the premixes, because, not everyone can use those. If you've got a few thousand litres of soil you need to redo, and especially if it's your third or fourth run, and you've put the premixes through it a few times and you've managed it really well, you can kind of get to a point where you just strip it right back and start applying the bare essentials. Sweet Organics and Tommy Ilfigure and Blood, Sweat and Trees. Nice to see you guys. Yeah, so applying some of those around that time That's a good time to look at those particular amendments. You might have some other favorite ones. Hit me up with the comments, because there's 1,000,001 different ones. We've got a whole bunch of different ones that we use. So I just more tried to compile like more of a desert island list. Once you've got them on your soil, though, one of the things that I really think is crucial to getting that working properly, and this is why some people I think have better effects sometimes when they brew teas, and the kind of teas I'm talking about are more the nutrient style ones, where you're effectively just kind of putting a bunch of organics in water and brewing that for a period of time, and you're not really breaking all that down so much, but you are sort of solubilizing and getting some level of microbe action going on. Those sort of teas, I think mainly what people get out of those is just faster breakdown. So the other way of doing it is, like I said, the pre-activation. That's going to speed that up, because you're doing some of what happens when you apply it into the soil external to the soil. The other thing is focusing on stuff that facilitates breakdown. So obviously your bokashi. So the herb superbs, they have a slight fermented sort of a smell to them. That's because they come pre-inoculated. So there are a range of effective microorganisms in there, and also some lacto that we culture here. That means when you apply it to the soil, that kind of takes off immediately and helps break down those amendments and sort of get them in there a little bit quicker. If you're familiar with bokashi composting, you know it's one way that you can, it's effectively a pickling technique, but it's one way that you can take things that you wouldn't put in your compost heap and break them down. So it's good for things like proteins, good for things like fats. Yeah, it can break down even bone and all that sort of stuff over time. So that's good to have when you apply all of those things that are rich in proteins and lipids and carbohydrates. The other thing that I'll like to use around that time actually is antimatter. I find that product is sort of tailor-made for helping break down the top dressings. So there's a whole bunch of different enzyme types in there, and those enzyme types are kind of included to break down the proteins to amino acids, to break down the fats to fatty acids, to break down any dead or decaying root matter into sugars, so that feeds the microbes that then feed the soil. So yeah, applying your top dressings, but then also focusing on how quickly you can kind of assimilate that into the soil, can also maximize that window. If it gets it a bit faster, then it can use it a bit sooner. Matt St. Clair, cool to see you. And I'll get to that one in a tick, Tommy. But yes, I do. It's pretty easy too. And can I go through the pre-activation quickly? All you do is you basically just take about 2 to 4 times the amount of top dressings you're going to use. So if you're going to apply 2 cups, you would take 4 to 8 cups of compost or castings or soil. Mix your top dressings with that, wet it down, and allow that to break down in sort of a container where it can breathe. So I just put a shirt over mine. You can use a tea towel or paper towel, whatever's going to fit your particular vessel. You just don't want to lock it up so it's fermenting. You want to have it so that it can actually breathe. And it'll do its little funky thing over there for a little while, and it shouldn't smell bad. It will kind of maybe go a bit, pickly, sometimes funky if you add a bit too much water, but not really. I mean, it just kind of smells like organic stuff breaking down. Neem meal is the thing that seems to give it a bit of a weird smell sometimes, because it's kind of got a bit of a strong odor. But yeah, that's all it really is. And then the microbes that are in the compost will start pre-digesting the top dressings, and it'll all fur up with a whole bunch of different, activity. And then you apply it to your soil when it's all fuzzy and at its maximum funkiness. So yeah, that's basically how you do it. Otto, I'm not sure if his story is still up on it, but he did a really great walkthrough of it as a video, which I should do. But yeah, and wet down at the start, and then just leave it. Yeah, it shouldn't need it. It won't be like you're going to put it somewhere cool and dry in your house, or some in your shed or wherever you've got where you put your gardening stuff. It shouldn't be somewhere where it's hot. You want it somewhere where it's going to be room temperature. And yeah, it shouldn't need any more water added to it, because it shouldn't really evaporate to that point. So just do that. I don't like, and it should just be like moist, like biscuit dough. Like it shouldn't feel wet. It shouldn't look wet. And yeah, if it ends up that way, you've probably added a little bit too much. So just, mist it through. I like to squeeze it through. And at a point where I can kind of squeeze it real hard and wring out maybe a drop of water, that's done. And put that away for 7 to 10 days. Mr. Chow and Aussie Autos. Cool. Yeah, so facilitating breakdown. You can also use lactobacillus serum. So a portion of bokashi, or depending how you make your bokashi. Some people make theirs from an EM blend, which has a bunch of specifically cultured organisms, and then you've got your sort of homebrew lactobacillus stuff, which you make yourself from the yeasts in your area. I like both of those. I think they both have utility. The EM organisms tend to not be as longer lived. And obviously what you take from your area tends to be a bit more suited to your area. So you'll find that stuff will hang around a bit more. Both are good. If you are the sort of person that likes to make your own inputs, by all means, incorporate a bit of that. And you can use it at the same time as antimatter, really, and at the same time as bokashi. So you can mix it up a little bit and get some more stuff in there. Grayson Hinrichs. And yeah, some shouts out to AC, getting some AC into some tents. It's important. Danked in there. Have a large, yeah. Basically, that's just talking about the re-amending, which it's not a difficult thing to do, and it gets easier the more times you do it. So yeah, you've applied your top dressings. You're working on getting them into the soil. After that point, unless there's really some demonstrable need for it, or unless I'm dealing with a variety that looks like it's going to run long, I'm not applying anything more in the way of top dressing. That's kind of where I leave it. It's not that you're applying fertilizer and then you've got to flush your plants because they're going to taste weird. None of that matters, especially in organics. It's more that just applying it after that point, I don't find that I need. And so I won't do it. If I think that I need to add something else, I would rather save that and do it when I re-amend. It's a good time to then set it up for the next phase. So yeah, another thing in that phase that you should try and pay attention to is, obviously we've spoken about watering. It's, people get sick of it in terms of me talking about it, but it is one of those really, really crucial components to getting the most out of your dirt. If you don't take the time to learn how to water, or how to identify when your plants want, when they want to change in that, then yeah, you can leave yourself behind. So it is important. So in that phase, you'll notice that they'll go from using a whole bunch to still using it, but they're kind of more existing. And then the roots will start to almost atrophy as the plant starts to really ripen. And it's at that phase that you want to really pay attention to only applying what the plant needs. So there's really no point at that stage, just continuing to water it as though it's in the massive bulking building phase. It's moved out of that now. It's in a period of still building, but more ripening. And as such, it has different needs. So pull back on maybe your watering frequency, or maybe your watering volume, or maybe both. If you're in a sub-irrigated planter, kind of not a lot you can do about that apart from varying the res capacity, like in terms of how much water you leave in it. But that can affect the ability of it to kind of work its way through the whole media. Similarly with blue mats, there's settings you can change and all the rest of it to where you can sort of allow it to, be a little bit drier. Auto pots, similar. You could maybe leave your tank run it a little bit more. But I find a little bit more dry back in that phase tends to produce a bulkier, better result, and tends to produce a better quality result. And less water means less humidity, means less losses. So that just makes looking after the whole situation a lot easier. It means your dehumidifier is not having to kick on all the time and go crazy, and saves inputs. I mean, water's an input, but if you're using boosters, so you're using microbes and things like that, those are in your water, that's more input, so it saves you money. Only apply what you need to apply. And yeah, some people, they're saying they're crushing watering lately because they got auto pots. Yeah, well, it's easy when it's automatic. But I still would say pay attention, because those systems are really good at the plant when it's in a really sort of super active phase, but when they move out of that, sometimes they can be applying a little bit too much, I think. And it's not that it's going to massively stunt things out, but I've found that, pulling back on that a little bit tends to give a bit more. So that's why I do that. And yeah, of course, be careful of your runoff in that phase too, because again, leading back to that, trying to control your temperature thing. A small amount of runoff in a room situation where there's a lot more space and air than that little puddle is less of a massive issue. But in a tent, and the smaller the tent goes, the more that whole environmental situation just gets magnified. The more a standing puddle of water is a huge issue. So paper towel, whatever you need to do, mop that stuff up. Don't leave puddles sitting around in your tent, especially at that phase. And then, yeah, lastly, sort of on that, well, not lastly, it's not like that's every single technique, but that's, some stuff that might help you, is preparation for the soil once you're done with it. Because, I personally don't throw my soil away after the first run, the second run, the fifth run. I just keep using it. Some people do. They like to get fresh dirt. That's their prerogative. I prefer to make it once for you, and then, you just kind of look after it. But what I like to do, especially when I'm reusing the soil, is I'll kind of, for the last week, I'll run antimatter maybe 2 or 3 times at the max dose. And what I tend to find is that once you chop it, that whole stump, like there's the carrot in the middle, but that whole stump root situation with a huge amount of the antimatter microbes in there and the enzymes tends to just break down really fast, which then makes the reamendment process really easy. So yeah, that's when it helps, I've noticed, to promote quality, maybe a little bit of color, but more so makes facilitating breaking down the stuff that's going to be dead. So it's heavily populated with cellulitic organisms, and then you cut the plant, they basically effectively go to work on that material as soon as it's considered dead. And if you're, the sort that's going to, you're then going to add a bunch of amendments in, which you're going to want to break down. Those microbes and enzymes will help break that down. And, if you're, say, even if you're not doing that, say if you're doing a till-in cover crop, that can help break down that once you chop it and kind of work that in there. So, yeah, that's something that I find really, really useful. In that last week before you cut them. So fully ripened, waiting for them to, effectively chop them. That's an antimatter week, nothing else. And g'day, Jimbo, Kofkin, and a few other people joined. Yeah, it's a bit It's easier for people to catch it earlier in the day, but today just didn't work out that way. And yeah, Dr. Jimbo Jones's latest photos on Instagram have been absolutely mind-blowing. Really, really, really cool stuff. Do you like my little book? It's got like all paisley patterns on it and stuff. And yeah, I do just leave the. I mean, I'll cut the little carrot part out. So I've got a gyprock saw that's pretty adept at it, and just kind of jam that in there and pull the carrot out. Looks like a carrot, especially if it's a seedling grown plant. But I'll just leave all the roots in there. And especially with the antimatter, I find that they break down really quick, and they're just carbohydrates. So they get broken down from your celluloses to your simple starches, which then the microbes can eat. So there's no real reason to pull those out. Plus exudates and things, microbial populations that are all living on and in there. So just, yeah, leave that in the dirt. It also, if you're not fully digging things over, it tends to give the soil a bit more structure next round too. So you'll notice that things drain better the more roots you get in there, and the more structure it kind of holds it together. So, if you're using big containers, that can maintain a bit of that structure for you. So someone asked before about re-amending the soil. Yeah, so Cocoa Garden there too. Yeah, leave some air pockets and all that sort of stuff as well. So, but yeah, as for re-amending your soil, it's pretty simple. So I do recommend some different rates, but in general, for most people, I'm recommending 2% by volume herbs of herb balance, and between 1 and 2% by volume of your Stone Age. So those pre-mixed amendment packs. So the balance being a general purpose fertilizer formulation. That's a good base to build your soil on, or to re-amend your soil with. And then the Stone Age there to sort of provide, your trace minerals, calcium, all that sort of stuff. It's going to fill in the gaps and give you a more complete fertilizer. So the first round is probably a situation where I'll go 2 and 2, so 2%, 2%. In a second re-amending, I might go 2 to 1. And in a third, it's either 2 to 1, or, maybe I'll fiddle with it a little bit more. But yeah, as for how to, that's by volume. So, if you've got a 10-litre pot or a 20-litre pot, it's just 2% or 1% of the volume of that pot. So you don't need to measure it out in grams. Just measure it out by volume. That's accurate enough. And then find some way to mix that together. So some people have got small compost tumblers they use. Other people, I'm one that'll just throw it all on a tarp and work through it that way. I actually have a big set of gumboots that I'll throw on that are only for that purpose, and they're great for stump stomping. So I'll kind of stump, flatten that out a little bit, spread the amendments on there, kind of work that through a bit. That's one way that I'll do it. So for a couple of 100 litres up to a few 100 litres of soil, that's pretty manageable. Your smaller amounts you can get away with doing in totes. So just, a decent size. Try to get more the Rubbermaid style ones, the kind of rubberized feeling totes, not the thin walled ones that crack as soon as you look at them. And you can jostle them around and, all that sort of stuff, especially if they've got a lid. So some people do that. You really want to make sure it's just mixed through well. It doesn't have to be blended to within an inch of its life, but you want to make sure that you've worked that re-amendment pack or whatever individual stuff you're doing through and in the mix as uniformly as possible, so that you don't get variation in your garden, especially if you're using individual pots, not a bed. So yeah, some people will then, once they've mixed it, put it back into their pots to let it cook down. You really want to try and leave it for a couple of weeks if you can, once you've done a re-amend, just to let it go through any thermophilic stuff first. Some people will keep it in a big pile. That helps break down faster. If you mix it and then put it back into your pots, yep, just keep it all moist, and you can even keep it in the room. Keep your airflow going. There's no need for any light, and yeah, just let that do its thing for a couple of weeks. There's some people that, and some opinions that you can mix a bunch of stuff in and then just sort of run it. But if it, runs away hot on you, that's going to, really the plant's not going to be happy with that. And you really, in my opinion, and this is why we allow like a longer breakdown period, you want some of that stuff to be converted over. You don't really want it in the fresh forms. And that seems to happen at the barest minimum of a couple of weeks when you're sort of doing a re-amend. So yeah, that's what you want to do. On the tail end of that, I will normally apply dark matter just because I like that as a platform for resetting a soil, and then run again. So herb superb, Stone Age, and optional, a little bit of dark matter. Mix that through, wet that down, let that cook down for a little bit. Off you go again. One there. Any tips for growing in outdoor in really hot climates? 35 constant. Yeah, look, it depends on your humidity. But the biggest tip that I can give you is variety selection. So you can't pick things that were bred under ideal conditions in sterile rooms halfway around the world, and have never been stress tested, and then sort of throw them to what is. I mean, there's a reason that they stress test vehicles here in Australia, because we have a pretty unique situation going on with how extreme our climate can be. So yeah, number one, select varieties that are tough or that have a preponderance for resilience against those sort of things. So whether that's picking, genetics that come from a particular origin, or whether it's particular genetics that have a history of being bred in areas that can cope with that, that's going to be the most crucial step to getting something that's going to survive under what are most of the time going to be adverse conditions. Beyond that, selection of your own stuff among those populations is going to make that even better. Aside from that, I've seen amazing things done just by having a large volume of soil. So you would be surprised how much you can alter the climate, like make a little microclimate by just using a really, might sound strange, but like a couple of 1,000 liters of soil per plant. Yeah, and then they don't run out of water. They can discharge, and while the heat's an issue and that's going to degrade your quality a little bit, it's really hard to kind of overlight expose this particular plant. So I have seen some amazing stuff come out of areas that are, quite unkind. I wouldn't recommend stuff like, poly houses and all the rest of it, because they're too hard to try and keep airflow going through. If it's a situation where you've got really high humidity, that's another one where it's, it's a tough situation. So airflow is going to help some varieties. Other ones, it's just not going to do anything at all. So yeah, I would focus on having large enough containers that it's sustainable watering wise, focusing on having some kind of airflow around the place, or at least in a spot where it gets good airflow. And, even consider a little bit of, taking 10% of the light exposure off. So while, not putting it in a greenhouse so much as a polycarb wall or a plastic walled one, but, just some black 10% shade cloth. You're cutting your light levels a little bit, but you're also creating a bit kinder of an environment there for the plant, which, will probably improve your quality a little bit. But really, it's just kind of have a go, bro. Just, get some stuff, throw some things in, have a go at it, because, it's not ideal. And also, too, when you're not dealing with ideal conditions, you cannot kind of expect ideal plants. Not to say that they're going to be rubbish and that they're not usable and that it's impossible. That's not what I'll ever say to you at all. Like, by all means, grow. But just, if you get some weird yellow leaves, or if they're kind of looking a little bit burnt looking, or, they look a little bit stressed, they're in a stressful environment, man. So it's like, that's par for the course. Doesn't mean they won't work though. It's a very, very tough thing, and it's just about finding the right variety that's going to produce under the conditions that you have, because we've had it around us longer than we've had dogs around us. So, and there's 1,000,001 different dogs. So if you look at a wolf and then you can look at a chihuahua and every little thing in between, like, pugs and all these things, there's equally or twice as much or 1,000,000,000 times more diversity in this gene pool that we're talking about. So guarantee there's a variety that'll work for you. Just might take a little bit of digging to find it. Once you find that variety, I would urge you to kind of work with it and try and sort of, further your exploration of that. You'll probably find some good results. So that might give you some tips. Coco Gardens has got some top dressings breaking down with some wormcast. Juan Hernandez, nice to see you. There, one there with shade cloth from Dankden. And yeah, see, Dankden will have some tips as well because he's over in the west. Anyone in South Australia too, they're going to have some tips because just harsh conditions, or people that live out, Lightning Ridge way over the Great Dividing Range where it's just desert. I don't know how they farm anything out there. I drove through there one time and it was. I wanted to go and see Lightning Ridge, and yeah, like just moonscape with corn and quinoa and things growing every so often, but for the most part, just moonscape. It blew me away. Happy Wookie, cool to see you. Outback Exotics. And yeah, Dankden doing a lot of Aussie genetics outdoors, which I've been saying to people. It's it also presents an opportunity for people here doing local work, which is super crucial to the sustainability of this whole scene we've got going on. Not everything can be floated in here, and that the sustainability of that is getting really, really difficult. So it's not to say that things won't ever be coming from there, but at the same time, leaving room for the people that are doing good work here is definitely a way that you can, you benefit from that because you're standing kind of on the shoulders of their work. And if they've adapted stuff to our climate, then that's saved you probably a year or two. But yeah, you're sort of like helping keep that work going, which, is only going to get better. So then you benefit from that further. Yep, and that's about it, Kofkin. That would be some tips that I would say. And beyond that, depending on the size of the area you're doing, look at some sort of cover for it, So it might not be something about keeping the rain off it, but if it's just hot, super ridiculous sun all the time, and that's going to be harsh for things to grow in, chill that out a little bit. 10% shade cloth is not really that expensive. Go for the black stuff if you can. The amber stuff, the green stuff, anything that's going to tint the light is really not as ideal. The black shade cloth I find is very neutral. I actually got onto that one through when I used to still have a lot of orchids, but when I was into orchid circles, there was always arguments amongst people about how green shade cloth, you don't get as good a flowering as under amber or under sandstone colored. And then there was one guy that used black, and his, blew everybody's away every time. And I've tried that myself and sort of seen that as a result, as well as with this particular plant we're talking about. So yeah, that would be it. Canberra crops. He's had a big one today. Have you seen that dude's yard? I go and camp in his yard, just, specifically. I'm just going to move in there for a week. Someone else can come and dig my dirt for me I don't know who that's going to be, but, yeah. Oh, Hydro Haven. G'day, Brett. How you going, man? I've had a bit of a adventure trying to get computers working today. And yet green shade cloth reduces UV. It does something to the light to where it tends to make things a bit more leaf prone. So yeah, it makes things leafy. The black stuff doesn't do that. So see if you can get that. And I will have I was a card carrying member of the Orchid Society for a lot of years, man, as well as the Cactus Society. So yeah, not anymore though, but yeah. Cattleyas were my favorite. Oncidiums are another one, and I really like Stanhoppias. They're probably the most interesting orchids. They kind of look like the predator, like me with a set of aviator sunglasses on. Red cellophane on the greenhouse. You can wrap stuff in red cellophane too. That used to happen years ago, and they'd put a little gold stamp on there for you. It's pretty cool. I'll leave it up to you to figure out what that is. Yeah, so I mean, don't let the fact that you live somewhere that's not the perfect ideal climate or whatever. Like, we can't all live in Colombia, or or wherever your Thailand, wherever your haven of when you picture ultimate greenery, wherever that might, Humboldt, whatever. Well, I thought Humboldt was a bit cold, but yeah, we can't all have that, but it doesn't mean that you can't grow. Have a go at it. But yeah, it takes a little bit more mucking around sometimes to find that thing that really does well under adversity. 100% though, there's things out there, because even before room tech got to the point where it was at, that's why you find a lot of those old varieties are so tough, because everyone's rooms kind of sucked. We had crappy fans and crappy lights, and things were always too hot and too dry or too too humid. Yeah, so that tech has advanced. So yeah, that's just kind of some thoughts. And a lot of people find too, when they move, say if they've had a variety for a long time and they're in a particular area, and then they move even a few hours north or south or wherever, that it's almost like a completely different plant just based on the location, elevation, all that sort of stuff. It all, yeah, it's kind of, the genetics are one thing, right? That's what the plant can be programmed to do. And then environment influences the expression, along with, other things, but environment influences the expression of those genetics. So obviously it's going to express itself different based on different environments. So that's the thing. That's why not everyone's one is the same. And it's why they're already getting this going overseas, but why in years to come, once this is all fully sorted out and on some sort of hopefully a good regulated framework, I think there'll be an origin, like with wine or with certain things, where it's not so much who it comes from, but where it comes from, the region, or because there's variety, and then there's kind of who's doing it, and then there's also the area, and yeah, there's certainly some areas that are just renowned for having terrific quality. Oh, what you gonna do? Always nice to see you on here, brother. It can only be Jared. Okay. Well then, hey Jared. And Mitch. And anyone else who's just joined. Alrighty. Oh, and little bits of join us. There's a few people who've just come on. And Quasimodo. Oh my lord. Well, we're sort of at the question end of it now. So yeah, it just hammer them at me if you, or throw them a ball, and I'm hopeless at catching, so I'll drop it, and then everyone will go, oh, he always drops it, and I'll go, yeah, okay, I try though. The champagne, yeah. So yeah, I hate drawing comparisons to other industries, because it needs to be its own. Any of those frameworks aren't going to fit it, because it's like trying to apply the rules of chess to the game of darts, or trying to have the same rules for golf as you would for motorsport. They're different. So you need to have firstly, it needs to be designed by people that have been in it, and not recently, people that have been in it for a while. Again, opinions. But it also needs to be something that's specifically designed for that particular industry for the best results. I think we'll get there. It'll take a long time. Take a long time, but we'll get there. As of personal favorites, I mean, people are probably sick of my list of stuff. I like old school stuff, man. So Anything that's modern, I just see parallel. Well, I suppose there's a couple of notable exceptions, like the real sweet breaded stuff. The baked goods stuff. That is a more last 10 years thing. I think I remember it was around 2012 that I kind of first came across that sort of stuff. And I like it. It's an interesting flavor and kind of a palate. But everything else, I just find, like, there's tastes and all that sort of stuff all jumbled together from different things that I already know in one package these days. Whereas years ago, they would kind of be more confined to an individual variety. So, I really like Old Skunks. I really like Old Hazes. So your Old Hazes have some really great sweet sort of tastes and aromas. Your Old Skunks have sort of like your more gross, there's cheeses, there's feet, there's dirty socks, there's, roadkill. There's also stuff that's bad good. So you're like, yeah, nah, but then also like, nah, yeah, that's cool as well. You're really old, earthy sort of Afghanica types. Really like those as well. So yeah, I also too, I like to reminisce a lot, and I'm a fan of nostalgia. So I do tend to like stuff that I came across on my journey with it, and really stood out to me. My personal favorite variety overall, though, is anything from the blueberry side type. I just think that particular plant is just magic, and for me is one that I really, really enjoy. The effects, the taste, tolerance proof, long lasting, a taste that you never really get sick of, that doesn't pair. Like, it's not like, oh, I can't have that one with this food because it's going to taste weird. Whereas there's, other ones that are definitely like that. Grow green, daddy. Nice. Veg daddy. King of the veg. Exactly like the turnip industry. Yeah, it's exactly like the turnip industry. It's why the turnip framework works so well. I can just see turnip dispensaries, and jars of turnips, and you kind of pick them, and you're like, wow, this is such a terpy turnip that I've got here. Yeah. And yeah, see, what things never really go out of style, right? Because like anyone knows, if you're one of those people that doesn't change your style up, I'm one of those. Like I'm perpetually just kind of like this, whatever the hell this is. Things come in and out, all the time. So, 1 minute people are like, why are you still doing that? And the next minute you're on the tip of it. So yeah, with flavors, there's the real candy, Jolly Ranchers, gummy bears, all that sort of stuff. That was around. Like I said, the baked goods kind of breaded craze thing, that's been around. Someone was talking to me about like garlicky, oniony kind of things like that the other day. And I've seen that before. That was around, a long time ago. Like I said, getting back to that kind of cheesy, like all those flavors, they kind of have, there's phenotypes that have a bit of that or a lot of that. So yeah, that's been around. So it's just all cyclical. But yeah, those they're all, don't chuck anything out. Like, they're all cool. And then when you start blending all that sort of stuff together, you can get some really unique expressions. So even if it's just a cut, it might not be reproducible or able to be locked into a variety. But you might have a really cool cut that just has a really unique flavor, and you can keep that for a while. Certainly worth hunting through. Dank Den there. One for the garbage smells. Yeah. Garbage, sick, garbage sick. Yeah, like just there's some yeah nah stuff that is really nah yeah. It's kind of, yeah, it's just that funk. You just gotta embrace that funk. It's a lifestyle. The Joker of Oz. Tie stick. There's one there for the old tie stick. I mean, most people maybe haven't come across that one, but I mean, there's like the right that sort of. I mean, it can be like juicy fruit chewing gum, or it can be like real earthy, tobacco-y, chocolatey, rich, dense kind of flavors. So yeah, it depends a bit, but yeah, cool variety. One of the greatest in history, and it's also a component of the blueberry that I like so much. There's people talking about sausage terps. So yeah, chorizo stuff, like, yeah. But again, that's that's been around. It's nothing new. But it is cool to see these things kind of, perpetuate and resurface and get remixed. It's like kind of like samples, there's like always golden eras with music. And then you tend to find out that, like, put it this way, most, if not all, 90s classic rap hip hop songs that you like are actually 70s funk jam classics, P-funk stuff and all that, Lakeside and all those sort of ones. They're just samples from that. And then, the ones from today, a lot of that sort of stuff is samples from samples. So it tends to be a bit like that with varieties where, it's kind of, you're remixing things. One there for blue cheese. That's a good one. And yeah, Humboldt does produce some interesting varieties. Interesting climate up there, but also interesting people. And that, it's the whole microcosm of that place. And yeah, I mean, it's different to now, to even how it would have been in 2017 when I was there. And I had people tell me that it was at that point way different to how it would have been, certainly in the late 90s, but, early 2000s. So it moves in light years over there. But yeah, there's some cool stuff comes out of there. Loopy fruit was a notable one that I sort of encountered while I was over there. Gigantic big thing. And well, I mean, yeah, we are getting different terp profiles with all the crossbreeding. Like I say, a lot of that though seems to just be kind of like a bunch of different things mixed together. So you had a bunch of individual fruits before, and now you kind of have a fruit salad. And sometimes that's great, and other times it's like, you know what, this is just a really average fruit salad, and this is just kind of confusing in taste. So yeah, it depends. It's harder to lock stuff down when you've got a whole lot of different ingredients making it up. It makes it really difficult to kind of narrow things sometimes. G'day, Maggie. And Catabera Crops was in Humboldt in 2012. Well, there you go. And chasing more fruity flavors. To be honest, man, I don't really chase any kind of flavors so much. Blueberry was just kind of one of those ones that I came across, and it was the totality of the experience. So, plant itself, the intrigue of it, the way it kind of grew, and all the various interesting things about it. And then, yeah, every other aspect of it was all, to me, it was a 10. So, yeah, that is my particular goat of all of those sort of things. But yeah, there's all that sort of stuff. But I've had favorites before that have been completely the opposite. They wouldn't be considered fruity at all. If anything, they would probably be in the more yeah, nah, yeah sort of a category. But yeah, sometimes it's what you're into. And diversity is always key. Like if I had to pick a desert island variety, I could kind of narrow it down to one. But I mean, it's like picking one food to eat for the rest of your life. You're going to get probably sick of it after a while and pine for something else. With this particular thing too, I think diversity is the key to maintaining joy with it. So having multiple things to choose from is an advantage. A lot of people find that these days. I find almost no one does just one variety anymore. Almost everybody's got a handful of things. and someone working on some things that have been jarred up for 70 days. Damn, man, that's basically like, yeah, it's been away for a while. DB1 Husker, cool to see you. Oh, well, there we go. Huh? Did I get someone's name wrong, did I? Okay, cool. All right, well, that's been an hour. So does anyone have any sort of questions lastly? Because if not, I can't believe I actually got the computer working, but I'll probably head off. Oswald. Massive shout outs to Oswald. Wait a minute. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Some people saying about having different varieties. It's definitely the key. Yeah, it's not. It's like if you're going to have your own veggie patch, you're not just going to plant lettuce, right? You're going to plant a bunch of different things so that you've got a lot of different things to choose from there. People are the same way with this sort of thing. So that's where all the restrictive plant numbers and things like that are also a little bit silly when regulators sort of start looking at them, because they assume that it's all one thing. And they don't consider that, you might want different ratios, or you might want different tastes or different effects and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's a long conversation to have. But, that's kind of why we have these conversations, is so that, we can better understand and then talk to other people about it and help them understand. And then over time, maybe everyone's not so confused, or, not so easily misled about stuff. Choc Mint OG and Black Dog. Yeah, Black Dog's a good one. That's definitely a good one. Crew are okay. I had terrible things with the computer today. I need some studio elves that come and live in the studio. But yeah, it's all fixed and we're live. And hopefully by next week, whatever was going wrong with the other restreaming thing is gone, and we're all good. Hope you're going good too, my dude. Crayons? No more crayons. Cocktail those bowls. Yeah. A friend used to like rainbow bags. So, or a variety for every day of the week. Some people might even have a couple for every day of the week if you're really, really fortunate. But that's, eventually, once we have the ability to kind of grab these things from other people, yeah, you'll be able to have a more diverse collection. All right. You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me at this late in the day for another one of the Sunday sessions. Like I said, I'm going to be changing it up a little bit after this point. I might even take a break for a week just to kind of retool the studio and get some more inspiration about some stuff. But yeah, it's not like we're out of stuff to talk about. There's heaps of stuff we can cover. Certainly some more deep work that I can sort of do on explaining the range that we've got and that we're trying to sort of get out there to people. And some people are using and enjoying, which I feel very fortunate that they've picked it up and got onto it and like it. So yeah, in the meantime, we've gone through a little bit of stuff sort of leading up to and getting you to the end of harvest. So, while we can go over some post-harvest stuff and all the rest of it, even though that doesn't really pertain to the organics and all that sort of stuff. My work in your garden tends to end when you stop using the dirt, which tends to be when you cut stuff down. But we can go over a bit of that in conjunction with talking about, maybe re-amending and stuff in a bit more detail. But like I said, I've got some other ideas I want to sort of implement. But yeah, it takes time and creativity and time for creativity to make those things. So I appreciate you all tuning in and following along and give me the opportunity to talk to you. And we will catch you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.